Clara had practiced the words in her head 100 times. Yet when the moment finally came, her throat tightened. The ranch house was quiet, except for the ticking clock and the distant sound of cattle shifting in the barn. She stood near the wooden table, fingers twisting the edge of her shawl, afraid to look up. This was the truth she always carried like a hidden wound. The truth that had ended other hopes before they could begin. "I need to tell you something," she said softly, the rancher. A broad-shouldered man with weathered hands and kind eyes set aside his coffee and gave her his full attention. He had learned long ago that silence, when offered with patience, could be a gift. Clara took a breath that shook more than she wanted it to. "I can't have children." The words fell heavy into the room. Clara waited for the familiar reactions, surprise, disappointment. Polite reassurance followed by distance. She had seen it before. Men wanted families' legacies, sons and daughters of their own blood. She braced herself, staring at the floor as if it might swallow her whole. But instead of silence, she heard a soft chuckle. She looked up confused. The rancher was smiling, not awkwardly, not sadly but warmly, as though she had just told him the sky was blue. "Good," he said simply. Her heart skipped good. She repeated, unsure if she had heard him right. "I've got enough kids for both of us," he continued, nodding toward the window. Outside, 3 children were racing across the dusty yard, laughing as a dog chased them in wide circles. One tripped, another helped him up, and they ran on as if nothing could stop them. The sound of their joy drifted into the house, light and unfiltered. Clara felt tears sting her eyes, but not from pain this time, from something dangerously close to relief. "They're not all mine," the rancher added gently, as if reading her thoughts. "Some were left here, some had nowhere else to go. But once a child steps onto this land, they're family. The word echoed inside her. For so long, Clara had believed her worth depended on what she could give a child, a future, a promise written in blood. She had never imagined being welcomed without conditions. "You're not disappointed?" she asked quietly. He shook his head. "Life gives us enough losses. I'm not here to count them. I'm here to see what we can build something in." His voice steady, honest, unafraid, broke through the wall Clara had carefully built around her heart. For the first time she felt seen not as a limitation, but as a person outside. One of the children waved through the window. Without thinking, Clara waved back. The rancher noticed and smiled again. "Wider this time, looks like they already like you." As the sun dipped lower, casting golden light across the fields, Clara realized this conversation hadn't ended something. It had opened a door, and though she didn't yet know what waited on the other side, for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid to step forward. Morning came early on the ranch, carried in by the sound of hooves, wind, and children's voices calling each other awake. Clara lay still for a moment, staring at the wooden ceiling, listening to a life that was already moving without her. Back home, mornings had been quiet. Almost empty. Here they were full before the sun even climbed the hills. When she stepped outside, the air smelled of earth and hay. The children were everywhere. One feeding chickens, another chasing the dog, the smallest sitting on the porch steps, rubbing sleep from his eyes. They paused when they saw her, studying her with open curiosity. Clara felt suddenly unsure of where to stand, what to do with her hands. She had never belonged to a place like this before. "Breakfast will be ready soon," the rancher called from the doorway, as if her presence there was already expected. That simple assumption eased something inside her. She helped in small ways at first, pouring milk, setting plates, wiping hands and faces that seemed permanently dusty. The children talked over one another, telling stories that made little sense, laughing at jokes only they understood. Clara listened more than she spoke, afraid to interrupt the rhythm that existed long before she arrived. As days passed, she learned their names, their habits, their small fears. One refused to sleep without a lamp. Another hated storms. The oldest pretended not to care, but lingered nearby whenever Clara worked. She noticed the way they watched her, testing whether she would stay at night. After the rancher finished his work, the children gathered by the fire. Clara sat on the edge of the room, sewing a torn sleeve, content to be useful without being central. But one evening a little girl climbed into her lap without asking. Clara froze, afraid to do the wrong thing, then slowly wrapped her arms around the child. The girl sighed, safe and certain. Something in Clara's chest shifted. From that night on, they came to her naturally for stories, for comfort, for help. With scraped knees and tangled hair, she found herself laughing more, her voice softer, her heart less guarded. She stopped counting what she could not give and began discovering what she already was. Still doubt returned. In quiet moments, she watched the rancher with the children. How naturally they leaned into him, how he carried them when they were tired. She wondered if one day he would regret choosing a woman who could not give him more. One evening, as the sky turned pink and gold, Clara voiced the fear she had kept hidden. "They deserve so much," she said. "I don't want to take anything from them." The rancher looked at her surprised. "You're not taking," he said firmly. "You're adding?" He gestured toward the house where laughter spilled. Through the open door, love doesn't run out. It grows. Clara watched the children through the window, whole alive, unafraid for the first time. She allowed herself to believe that she wasn't filling an empty space. She was becoming part of something already full, and making it richer just by staying. The first real storm of the season arrived without warning. Dark clouds rolled over the hills, swallowing the sky, and the wind rattled the windows of the ranch house. Like impatient hands, the children grew restless as thunder cracked overhead. Clara moved among them, steadying voices, guiding them indoors, surprised at how naturally calm she felt. When the youngest began to cry, fear written plainly on his small face, Clara lifted him without hesitation. She held him close, murmuring soft words she didn't even remember learning. His breathing slowed against her shoulder, and in that quiet moment she understood something important. Love didn't ask permission. It simply acted that night. The storm worsened, rain hammered the roof, lightning splitting the darkness. One by one, the children crept into the main room. Drawn together by fear and comfort, Clara spread blankets near the fire, telling stories while the rancher secured doors and windows. The room glowed with warmth, a small island of safety against the chaos outside. After the children finally fell asleep, the rancher joined her by the dying fire. For a long time, they said nothing. The storm faded into a steady rain, and the silence felt companionable. "Rather than heavy, you handled tonight well," he said at last. Clara smiled faintly. "I didn't plan to. I just did what needed to be done." He nodded. "That's what makes a family." His words stayed with her long after he went to check the barn. In the days that followed, Clara noticed changes not in the children, but in herself. She no longer flinched when they called for her. She no longer stepped back when decisions needed to be made. She began suggesting guiding, correcting gently, and the children listened. One afternoon, the oldest boy fell from a fence and cut his leg badly. Panic spread quickly. Clara ran to him, pressing cloth to the wound, her hand steady even as her heart raced. When the rancher arrived breathless, he found the boy calm, trusting, holding Clara's hand. "Moss said it'd be all right." The boy whispered. The word hit her harder than any thunder. Later, when the house was quiet again, Clara sat alone on the porch, staring at the horizon. Fear crept in. Not of failure, but of loss. Loving this deeply meant risking everything. She wondered if she was strong enough for that. The rancher joined her, following her gaze. "They chose you," he said softly. "Just like I did." She looked at him, tears threatening. "What if I fail them?" "Then we failed together," he replied without hesitation. That certainty anchored her. As the sun dipped low, casting long shadows across the fields, Clara realized she had crossed a line she could never uncross. This was no longer a place she visited or helped. It was her responsibility, her joy, her fear, her home, and for the first time in her life, she was no longer afraid of what she couldn't give. She was learning to trust what she already had. Time moved differently on the ranch. Days turned into seasons, and seasons quietly reshaped everything they touched. Clara no longer counted how long she had been there. The ranch had stopped feeling temporary long ago. The children grew taller, their voices deeper, their laughter carrying farther across the fields. Yet some things remained the same. The way they gathered around her at the end of the day, the way the house felt fuller when she was inside it. One evening, Clara stood at the kitchen window, watching the sunset bleed into the sky. The oldest girl was helping the younger ones with their chores, correcting them gently in the same way Clara once had. Seeing it, Clara felt a quiet pride she hadn't known she was allowed to claim. There were hard days, too. Crops failed one season and another year. Sickness passed through the ranch, leaving everyone exhausted and afraid. Clara learned that love was not only about warmth and comfort, but endurance. She stayed up through long nights, cooling fevered foreheads, whispering reassurance when fear crept in. The rancher worked beside her without complaint, their movements synchronized by shared purpose rather than words. One night when the children were finally sleeping, Clara confessed something she had carried silently for years. I used to think my life would always feel incomplete, she said, like I was missing something everyone else had. The rancher listened, his hand resting over hers, and now he asked, "Now I know I was wrong," she said softly. "I wasn't missing anything. I just hadn't found where I belonged." He smiled, not in triumph, but in understanding belonging isn't given. He said, "It's built." Years later, the ranch echoed with new kinds of sounds. Older children arguing good-naturedly, younger ones asking advice, laughter mixed with responsibility. They still called her Ma, even when they no longer needed her. In the same way she accepted the change with grace, knowing love wasn't measured by dependence. On a quiet afternoon, Clara and the rancher sat side by side on the porch, watching the land they had shaped together. She never bore children, but she had raised them. She had not passed on her blood, but she had passed on her heart. "I used to fear that I had nothing to offer," she said, leaning into him. He shook his head. "You gave them what mattered most." As the sun dipped below the horizon, Clara felt a deep, settled peace. Her story had not followed the path she once imagined, but it had led her somewhere better. She had learned that motherhood was not defined by birth, nor family by blood. It was defined by love that stayed even when it didn't have to. And in that truth, Clara found everything she had ever needed.